So we've got 10 minutes left to spend that kind of almost reflecting back and horizon scanning for the future. So I know that this is a field that has seen quite a lot of rapid change over the last few years. Can you just kind of explain to us what you would say have been the most significant changes for this community in terms of advancements and progress?
So, from a physician's point of view, we've got better at diagnosing. I mean, there have been changes. We just learnt about kit and all the rest of it. So, from my journey over the years, we're better at diagnosing, and therefore we're diagnosing more. So now we need to get the education and the links up that we're talking about. The exciting journey that I've had, I've been very privileged to be part of it, is that we've got new medications. So we treat patients' symptoms with what I'm going to call generically anti-mediator therapies, and it will depend on mast cell stabilizers, which is what we've always done. And we still have to not kick those aside and say they're not important because we've got brand new exciting drugs that target it, because the majority of patients will still need those. So we've got to be careful we don't downplay those, because some people just need two or three anti-mediator therapies and they're absolutely fine. But for me, for those patients with advanced disease, we've got targeted drugs that have made a difference, and they've been disease modifying, they've improved quality of life, they've improved life expectancy. And in some patients, they've more or less taken away that cancer. And I say that loosely because the kit is always there. And then we also now have these drugs moving from an arena where most drugs are treated in patients who have a low life expectancy and are advanced, to the bigger bulk of patients, which we know are symptomatic. And of those symptomatic patients, of those patients with mastocytosis, be it in the skin or SM, about 40 to 50% are extremely symptomatic and they have debilitating lives. And we're now seeing in trials these targeted drugs are making a difference and hoping to move them out into the clinical arena. So, right place, right time, right drug, really, and lucky. But
Yeah.
that's been really exciting to see how we can make those changes and input them in clinical practice.
And Jess, for you, obviously you said at the start that when you first started your journey, there was no groups, there was no real kind of benchmark information. The internet was quite in its infancy. So obviously that's a big change. But what would you say have been the biggest change from an advocacy perspective and patient support? And what remains the greatest unmet need where you think greater focus really needs to look as we look to the future?
Yeah. I mean, I remember I was about 10 years in when the first targeted drugs for related conditions came out, and it looked like maybe one was going to be helpful. Unfortunately, it's really only helpful if your kit isn't mutated. So that turned out not to be the thing. Um, but we were excited back then to start thinking about, there might actually be drugs. So that's really exciting to see the ways in which things are changing. Um, I think for the UK, the things that I think we want to work on is how do we get people diagnosed more
Yeah.
efficiently? How can we help communicate about the patterns that people would be seeing in general practice and in other specialties to recognize this sooner, because people do better when they're getting their symptoms addressed, whether or not you have, a fancy drug or anti-mediator therapy. Generally, quality of life goes up significantly that way. Um, I think the having the care be joined up so that you have a multidisciplinary team that helps to look after a patient. I like multidisciplinary teams, but I worry unless there's a sort of a central person who's taking responsibility for the patient. So great if you get everybody in there, but somebody needs to own the patient. So
Navigator.
yeah, so we want to we want to develop these teams, but we also want to make sure that they're grounded teams, with that focus. Um, we want to make sure that when there are new medications, that not only are they approved in the UK, in terms of the regulations that say that they're safe and effective, but also that they're paid for on the NHS. And that's work and energy to try to tell the patient story in a way that makes it clear what the benefit is. And so that's, that will, we love that there's a pipeline, and we need to make sure that they get to Deepti so she can actually prescribe it. And I'd say, the ongoing task is the, empowering patients to feel like they can ask for what they need in the clinic, at home, at work, at school, and they can feel like they have some sense of control over their lives.
Mm. And going back, Deepti, if I can come to you on the the clinical care guidelines that we talked about at the very start. Obviously, they're a really key, important part moving forward with patients. Is there work that can be done, or what do you see as the work to be done to make sure that they're really widely adopted and implemented across different centres, so there isn't that kind of variety between whether you're in a centre or a kind of more local setting?
So I can tell you now there'll be general for adult to start with, and then we might scope out. And they're looking at managing adult patients with mastocytosis. And although they're being developed under the umbrella of a hematology group, we are going to make sure that different disciplines have a section in them. So it's not just going to be a hematological perspective based on the current evidence. And when we have those, and there is a process that needs to go to make sure they're ratified and the evidence is correct, that can take up to a year, but I'm hoping we will have them out there. And I think the exciting bit is that we now have drugs, so we can now advise folk into how to use these new drugs in the arena that I have been lucky enough to have the experience of, but they may not, because translating what comes out of a paper and from conferences is very different from having a patient who has that experience. So for me, that's the next step. How they're done is they're disseminated and then they are presented, and it would be our job to make sure we share them and make sure that there are links available. And secondly, I think to embed on that is to make sure that people know who to contact. So I'll come back to call a friend, and that's where we do have this connectivity. It sounds like there is no connectivity. I think it's patchy, but it is there. And we do have a network where people will phone up and say, I've got this patient. I'd like to start this. These are the symptoms. And we have a conversation about the patient. Or we have a Teams meeting about the patient and say, okay, here are the things that I think that need to be looked out for. And sometimes that will mean also that I have a conversation with the patient and then to explain it. So that is being built up. And that is because we've got to this point, and we weren't at this point 4 years ago or 5 years ago. So it all comes to, the critical time for which we can use at that point. And I think we are at that point to try and get it out there for patients to get the best care, maybe even things out a little bit. The second bit is, there are so many specialties, so many things within the NHS that can possibly be a hindrance, but we need to think about how we overcome them and connect. And when we think about a multidisciplinary team, we don't have to have everyone sitting in the same room. In our service, we have people we phone, we have Teams conversations, we know who that go-to person is. And if we can develop that across the UK and then have a guideline as a basis to build on it. And then in terms of the guidelines, most of the guidelines in the UK then act as an audit tool. So, an audit is done this is the diagnostics. Are we doing that with our patients? So they act as a basis to then lift up the patient care or the diagnostic pathway or the management. And that can only be a good thing.
And so I'd like to end with you, Jess, actually. Obviously there's a huge groundswell of progress. There's lots of exciting things happening, lots of things kind of just on the cusp. If you were, if there was a call to action from you to the community, is there, or is a really strong message that you would like to give to the community, what would that be from a real advocate and someone who's lived this experience as well? What would be your message?
I would say for patients, the message is it's okay to ask for help. This is especially for British patients who tend to be shy to ask for help. It's okay to say, I need something. And to say, I don't understand, if somebody says something to you, and say, can you explain that a different way? To really, to be okay saying what you need. And I think for the clinician community, I think the message is, please try to treat the whole patient. Use the skills that you have to take care of the parts you really know how to take care of. And if there are parts you don't know, reach out and use that network that Dipti described, as being in progress. And really make sure that you're not just looking at the parts that you're comfortable with, and ask enough questions so that you actually find out from the patient what's bothering them.
So really it's curiosity, isn't it, on both sides? I think it's keeping your diagnostic curiosity, but also as a patient being curious about what's on the horizon and being, like you say, willing and able to ask for help and know where to go for it. Gosh, we've covered such a lot in this hour. Thank you both so much. I didn't know whether we'd get in the hour, but we've done it. So thank you. I would like to give my sincere thanks to you both, to Deepti and to Jess, for joining us and for being so candid today. I know I really appreciate you both being so open with your expertise and your insights. Thank you, of course, to Blueprint Medicines for helping us bring this conversation to our listeners, and to everyone that's joined. We've had a huge sign up for this event, so it's really great to see so many people joining live and staying with us throughout the whole session, which really demonstrates the interest in the topic, which is fantastic. So just to let also everyone know that the Rare webinar will be available on demand for catch up afterwards within a few weeks on our website, and anyone that signed up today will be sent the transcribe and the video afterwards. So please do share it with anyone in your networks that you didn't manage to get to, who weren't able to join it live. Also, please do feel free to reach out via the contacts which will be on the screen shortly, for anyone who wants to contact us. We always welcome hearing from you and connecting with anyone that likes more information on the topic. But for now, thank you both so much, and thank you everyone, and have a great rest of your day.